Well, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm excited you're here today. Would you like to introduce yourself and we'll get started there?
Sure. My name's Leah Farrow, and I tattoo at and own Arcadia Tattoo Huntsville.
Awesome. So I know you're a Huntsville native. You've been here since you were 2.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about growing up here in Huntsville, and did you always envision that you were going to move back and stay here and call Huntsville home?
Yeah. So no, I thought when I was growing up, I thought Huntsville was kind of lame.
Yeah, most people
do. I don't think
do.
that anymore.
Yes.
So I lived here my dad's from here originally. He went to Huntsville High.
Okay.
And then my parents were hippies. My mom's from New York. Anyway, they met in California and then had me and realized they couldn't afford it even back then and moved back to Huntsville.
Okay.
So I lived here till I was 10 and then moved away and then came back as an adult, kind of when I was still figuring out what I wanted to do for a living, kind of floundering. My parents moved back to take care of my grandparents. And
okay, so all your family was here, so it kind of made sense for you to come back.
Yeah,
but at the time, what were you doing? So what would you ultimately go to pursue a career in, and then kind of how did tattooing come about?
So I drew all my life. Like from a young age, I designed my little private school's yearbook and stuff like that, like the cover. And just my mom's a graphic designer and a painter, so it's always been in our life. But I never thought I was good enough to do it for a living, even though I loved doing it. And I was kind of under the false impression that you either have it or you don't, right? As opposed to, no, you work at it, you learn.
You get better and stuff like that.
Exactly, yeah. And so I just never thought I was good enough to do it for a living, even though I loved it. So I was kind of pursuing it for a while. I thought I wanted to be an anthropologist.
Okay.
And then I thought about doing, I don't know, like something in kind of like PR, stuff like that. I thought I wanted to do a record label for a minute, so I was kind of just figuring out what I wanted to do and nothing really stuck. And then one day I was working an actual corporate job. I was actually at the time living in New Jersey as an adult.
Okay.
And I was working a corporate job that was like a really good job.
Yeah. The typical 9 to 5 that you get when you graduate college and you do it for your entire life and you don't like it. Yes.
Yes. And that's actually kind of what lit a fire under me because I realized like, okay, people do this forever.
Yeah.
And no shade to people who want to do that or do that. But for me, my soul was dying.
Yeah.
So I basically thought, okay, my mom always said, like, if you didn't have to work, what would you do? Kind of after your beach vacation, right? And I would draw.
Yeah.
So I thought, actually, if I back up a little, this is when I was 28. When I was 23, actually, I got my first tattoo, and it was a tiny little Pegasus on the back of my right shoulder. And it's funny because at the time, tattoos just weren't as popular, and especially with women. And I remember I went to the Ren Fair a few days later and I was wearing a tank top. I had one little tiny tattoo and some guy catcalled me and he was like, "Ooh, tattooed lady," which is just funny if you think about now because so many people have tattoos.
It's such a normal thing.
Exactly. No one would think about that.
Interesting.
And at the time, that experience for me, I was not great with money and I saved all like a month to, afford a $40 tattoo.
Yeah.
I went into this tattoo shop. The guy acted annoyed that I was there and he picked it off the wall, which was very normal at the time. And he did the tattoo and I left there thinking, I can draw better than him and I'm nicer than him.
Yeah. And I guess at that point, the experience, so was that first tattoo the kind of the tipping point that then you started getting more tattoos and then I guess at what moment, so like you end up moving back to Huntsville to kind of figure out what you wanted to do? Well,
I got an apprenticeship in New Jersey, actually. Okay. So at the time, because I was working that corporate job and I realized like, I can't keep doing this. Yeah. So I said, okay, I'm going to really try to become a tattoo artist. And I had gotten a few more tattoos since then.
Okay.
And so what I started off is just drawing all the time, getting better at drawing and really working at it. And then I also started researching tattooing and I knew it was very faux pas to learn on your own. Which I agree with because you can really hurt people that way.
For sure.
But I wanted to just basically, I didn't know how I was going to get an apprenticeship, but I wanted to learn everything I could about it other than actually tattooing.
Okay.
And then one day I walked into a tattoo shop and I said, are you just on a whim? I said, are you taking apprentices? And they said, yes. And they let me.
And that was in New Jersey at the time?
In New Jersey, yeah. And so I actually, I was married and I had a 3-year-old and I thought like, okay, this is going to be really hard because I'm going to be working so much. So I ended up working my full-time job. I would change in the bathroom out of my corporate clothes, eat a sandwich in the car, and drive straight to my apprenticeship. And I would do my apprenticeship from like 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., wake up at 5 the next morning.
And just do it again.
Do it all over again. And I worked every Saturday. I had Sunday off. I did that for a year. I was working like 70 hours a week for a year, but it was, I don't think I would have done it if I hadn't kind of seen my future as like someone sitting in an office all day doing something I didn't love.
Yeah. And so how does apprenticeships typically work? So are you getting paid as a tattoo artist at that time, or are you just doing stuff for free? And like, how does it go from quickly to like, you know, testing on people or testing not on a person to then testing on people to then actually like graduating from this apprenticeship?
Yeah. I mean, all apprenticeships are different, obviously, but generally any decent apprenticeship will have well, most apprenticeships are not paid.
Okay.
It's kind of like you put the sweat equity in, and then in return you get the knowledge, and then you get a career, which I think is fair as long as you are really learning.
For sure.
But basically I would go in and I would do all the grunt work, right? I would clean the shop. I would draw all the time, because the medium of tattooing is different than other mediums, and that some things don't work as well as a tattoo as they work. You know, you can put tons and tons of detail into a small space in a kind of an analog drawing, but in tattooing over time, it doesn't look great. So you have to kind of learn what works. And then, so I was drawing all the time, and then I was basically learning how to set up, learning how to break down, basically everything but tattooing.
Okay.
And then after I got to a certain point, I got a machine, and actually the first tattoo I ever did was on a grapefruit.
Okay.
Which it's nothing like skin, but at least it kind of gets the initial jitters out of the way. And then after that, I tattooed myself.
Okay.
That's the second one. And then the third one I think was also on myself, because by the time I was about 8 months in my apprenticeship, by the time I was able to do that.
Okay.
And so it's funny how like your perspective changes from the beginning. I was like, I'm never going to tattoo myself. I want perfect tattoos. And 8 months in, I'm like, I'm going to tattoo myself every day.
That's amazing.
I was just so excited.
Yeah. Like, and I guess like that skill set had started to being developed. So at that point, you're like, I am confident enough, and I had this machine that allows me to be creative, and I can be creative on myself.
Yeah, although it was horrible. I mean,
what were those first two that you did yourself?
Places I could reach easily, right? So they're both on my thigh. The first one is just like a little dove with a olive branch, because you know, the little hippie I am with the like peace sign. And then the other one was actually like these flowers, and it has a banner that says apprentice.
Okay.
08. So I'll never forget when I did my apprenticeship.
That's awesome. Okay. So you do your apprenticeship all in New Jersey, and then you come back to Huntsville a couple years later, or a year.
Yeah, a couple of years later, I came back to Huntsville, and I ended up in Auburn for a little bit, and then I moved back to Huntsville for good.
What was the tattoo scene in Huntsville at that time when you moved back?
So I started working at another shop. It was still very much, I guess this was like 12 years ago, something like that. Tattooing had already started changing into a more custom-based experience, whereas before you would go in and
have
you
a
would
book
see,
to flip through.
Exactly. And you would like pick something off the wall, and people, basically shops would buy, you know, that from a company or from other artists. The technical name for that is flash. And technically flash can be duplicated. So like you might pick something off the wall, but another shop might have the same thing.
Wow.
And it was understood that it wasn't custom for you, and someone else could get it.
Gotcha.
It started to change while I was in Auburn, where I was drawing a lot more and I was doing custom pieces on people. And then by the time I moved up here, it was almost entirely custom by then. Not that there were not shops that had the flash on the walls, and I like shops like that. I mean, I learned in a shop like that. It's cool.
It has that, still like kind of that nostalgic feel to it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've gotten stuff like that too. So yeah, no shade on that. But I started basically working. I would still take walk-ins, but it kind of started moving into a more appointment-based, which makes sense, because if you're drawing everything custom, you need time to draw.
For sure.
So and I started getting really busy. And a few years after I moved here, I had my second child, and I was like, you know, I think I just want a private studio. There was a lot of demand. I had a lot of demand for me. I was booking up a few months in advance. And so at the time I thought, I'm just going to open a private studio, and it's just going to be me. And that way I can be a little more in control of my schedule with my son.
Kind of open whenever you want, kind of do however many tattoos you really wanted to do, and you're able to do them all custom pieces at a time.
Exactly, and keep a little more of my money and stuff. And so I ended up opening on the second floor of Campus 805. And it was like I I think a 900 square foot.
Okay.
Maybe less, 700
But
square foot.
it was just you at the time.
It was just
and
me.
Did you have the name Arcadia at the time?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did that name come about?
So I wanted something that started with an A.
Okay.
For a couple of reasons. One, just you see that first, usually alphabetical. Two, I thought it would be cool to be able to, have a little anarchy symbol.
Yeah, there you go.
And then my oldest at the time was really into Greek mythology, and I wanted a name that kind of meant like peace, like utopia or peace. And I was looking at names of different utopias, and Arcadia was a Greek utopia, a pastoral utopia where humans and animals lived peacefully together. I love animals, and I just thought that's perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so the name, you have a 900 square foot place, and you're just slowly growing. At what point did you get to actually because I mean, what was it, a few years after you were in that space, you opened up the bigger, I guess it was 3 years ago.
2 years. 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Mm-hmm. How long did it take from you having just you in there to actually having other people and other tattoo artists?
So we went from just me to including me, 9 artists within the span of 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And slowly, it was slow. Like I got 2 more people in my space downstairs, realized we're already busting at the seams. And then the space above us in the old art room, Campus 805, that became available. And I was pretty scared at first because it's 3,200 square feet. And I don't know, I've never been a business owner, so I'm learning as I go. I'm reading things. I want to be a really good business owner. I want to be really good for the people that work for me. I want to be really good for my clients, but also it's a lot of pressure because you put a lot of money into something. Yeah. I didn't borrow any money to do it. I just used all the money I made. We sold our house and I used some of that money that we got. And so I invested it. I was all in. Yeah. And then we kind of just grew organically. We started getting more people, and then we expanded into piercing. Yeah, and which
I bet now is that's allowed you to kind of tap into a market that you never really got to see prior.
Yes, exactly. And I'm not a piercer, so it was really important to me to, one, maintain a very high standard, but also to have people I trust who will maintain that standard, which I absolutely do. Because really with anything, it's I want to make sure standards are very high. Obviously with cleanliness, but also with quality and also, service. I really try to maintain that friendliness, all that stuff.
Yeah. Cause like you mentioned before, when you went into that tattoo artist and you got your first one, you saw the things you didn't want to do. And you're not necessarily and I guess you probably also saw things that you're I really like this. I want to make sure I do this. Yeah. But now that you've scaled to the size you are now, you got to make sure you're able to kind of maintain that culture.
Yeah, that's really the difficulty. As a small business owner, it's I still tattoo full time. I have an amazing shop manager. She's the only reason I can still tattoo full time. But I mean, I love everyone that works for me. We have an amazing team. But sometimes, you might come to work and not be in a great mood, and it's really as an owner, kind of maintaining that culture of we're really grateful for our clients. A positive atmosphere. And then also just one where we hold each other to a higher standard. But tattoos are expensive. Yeah. Our piercings are expensive because we, all of our jewelry is titanium or gold.
Oh, wow.
Nickel free, very safe and also, guaranteed. It's very high end jewelry on purpose because you're putting it in an open wound.
For sure.
And then we just became members of the Association of Professional Piercers. Wow. Which causes you have to go through a whole thing where you submit, essentially proof of knowledge, extensive knowledge about piercing from our piercers.
Interesting. Okay.
You have to send in a video of your entire facility. You have to show that the people you're ordering from, your jewelry suppliers, are high end, or at least they qualify for their standards. There's just, it took us a year for me to, get the shop in a place, just little things I had to change the floor in the piercing room.
Wow.
Yeah, stuff like that. But that was really important for me too, because it signifies that we really care and that we have a high professional standard. But anyway, doing all that, and keeping up those standards and keeping up kind of the atmosphere, I'm learning as I go. Yeah. I mean, I'm really pleased with how things are turning out now though.
Yeah. So if someone was to see your style, how do you categorize the style of work that you typically do?
I like to call it like bright, happy tattoos.
Okay.
So the style I have is more of like an illustrative or neo-traditional style. I use a lot of cues from traditional tattoos just because I think they last a really long time. I have a lot of traditional tattoos. And so I use, bold line weights, and I pack in a lot of color, and I use a lot of contrast to make my tattoos look really, really, really bright.
Okay.
And just in general, the way I draw tends to be like with joy. Like I also like things that are kind of funny.
Yeah.
Or just absurd or whimsical. I like that in general.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that would be my style, but like super, very bright, very high contrast, very colorful.
Okay. Yeah. And so, I mean, like you mentioned it earlier, like you had no really background in being a small business owner. And you've obviously been pretty successful doing it over the last few years. What is something you know now in the business as you've kind of grown and figured things out as you go that you wish you would have known when you first started?
I think that I'm kind of a perfectionist. And so when anything didn't go exactly right, I would kind of, be very like concerned, like, oh my gosh, this is the end of the business, when really that wasn't logical. But I think that realizing that there's just going to be ups and downs and that it's fine. Like you can roll with them and stuff. But I put a lot of pressure on myself for the business to succeed, not just for myself, but for everyone that works for me, because
it's their livelihood.
Exactly.
It's their livelihood.
Yeah. And so I'm a very much like my first priority is to support that people that work for me, because I think if you have really happy people that work for you, that then translates into being really great for your clients.
For sure, yeah.
And so that's really important to me. And I've learned that, like, I had worked in a lot of different shops, and some shops were great and some shops were not so great. And I learned kind of what really bugged me, when I worked for other people, and what really made me resentful or what made me happy. Yeah. And so I try to apply that. Perfect.
So, I mean, as we're recording this, we're halfway through 2024. What are some maybe future goals, future plans that you hope Arcadia is able to do, and even maybe you specifically, like you're hoping to be able to do this year?
Well, I'm really lucky that I'm very booked out and I stay very busy, but for me, kind of personally, I just really love doing exciting projects and stuff. For the shop right now, we're really doing, everything's kind of moving along, and it's really great. I'm buying a ton more jewelry this year. We already have a huge selection. Yeah. We really have the biggest selection of any place that pierces in Huntsville. And there are a lot of great piercers in Huntsville. We just happen to have, I've just invested a lot in jewelry.
For sure.
And so I'm trying to almost double our jewelry inventory so that people just can pick what they want, So that's one thing I'm doing. And then I don't know if I'm going to do it anytime soon, but I've been kind of thinking of maybe a second location in the future. A lot of people are having trouble getting into tattoo shops now just because everyone's so booked up. Yeah. And so I thought it would be fun to do a more walk-in based shop where people, if they aren't, they have a whim and they want to go get tattooed like it used to be, they can go get tattooed.
And it's a space that's also like has that high standard that you're talking about.
Exactly. And then, it might be more traditional where there are a lot of things on the wall you can pick from, or, it's just kind of, I'm mulling it over. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, for sure.
And
finding a space in Huntsville is become harder and harder,
especially with tattoo shops, because the zoning is kind of prohibitive for us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're only allowed to open in certain zoned areas.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you have to really look out for that. I got really lucky at Campus 805 because it's such a great location. Yeah. But a lot of areas, you can't. Like I looked at a lot of places that the zoning was like,
interesting.
Nope. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. I'm hoping as Huntsville gets bigger that they loosen up on that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
But
so if anyone's listening and they want to connect with you, they want to see the work you do, they want to go visit Arcadia, they want to get a piercing, they want to get a tattoo, where can they find you, and where's the best places to connect?
So we have a website, arcadiatattoohuntsville.com, and you can see all of our artists work there. You can click their picture. Everyone has their baby pictures actually in there.
It's amazing.
You can click their picture and then you can see all of their work. You can of course follow us on Instagram. Same thing, Arcadia Tattoo Huntsville. And then we have everyone listed there, and you can see their individual Instagrams.
Perfect.
And then as far as piercing, I mean, all our piercers are on there as well, but we take walk-ins for piercing.
Okay.
So from Tuesday through Saturday from 11 to 6:30, we take walk-ins. So you can just walk in, and we pierce 7 and up.
Okay.
So and we require consent for children. They have to be able to write their own name and consent that they understand what's happening. That's really important to me. And then that's the best place to get in. We also take walk-ins for tattoos on Saturdays. So
perfect.
We do try to kind of help people who don't want to wait.
Yeah.
You know, and we have the reputation sometimes of being really booked up, and some of our artists are, but now that we have 9 artists, we actually have more openings than before. So if you go to our website and you click on an artist, if they have openings, there's like a little form you fill out, and it goes straight to them, and it answers all the questions. Like, it avoids all the back and forth, right? Because it's just like, where do you want it? How big do you want it? What do you want? And it answers all the questions right away. And we have people who can get you in like probably in the next couple of weeks.
Wow.
Luckily.
Okay.
So like they're starting to book up, but just we have so many now.
Yeah.
You know, and the other really, really cool thing about all of our artists is that everyone kind of has a specialty.
Okay.
So if you have a particular kind of tattoo, you can really find a good fit. And I really love that, because then you get the best tattoo you could possibly get, right? Because, I mean, I can do black and gray, I can do black work, I can do all sorts of types of tattoos, and I have no problem doing them, but it's like by specializing in my style, I'm able to really work on that style and develop it, and it's the same with the others as well.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll have all the information in the episode notes, so if you want to find out anything that we've mentioned, you can visit there or in the description of the video. But I appreciate you coming on the podcast, talking a little bit about your story and a little bit about Arcadia.
Thank you.
Yeah.